Okay, today I'd like to talk to you about the time I started a game studio with a couple of friends. We made and sold a game to a publisher and the journey that we took from start to finish. So this started in roughly 2014, 2015. At the time, I was working as a software developer at a media company that also happened to publish video games. I was mostly working on the back end stuff, subscription service stuff that you wouldn't actually consider part of the gameplay. And in my spare time, I would create these little prototype games with my friends. We had another developer, we had artists, and we would just make these small little toy games just to scratch our itch of making games that we liked. We made a few prototypes, and one of them happened to get into the hands of a friend of ours who had connections with a game publisher. So we showed our game to the game publisher, and they really loved the gameplay, they loved the character design, they loved where we were going with it. They wanted to have a publishing deal with us. They wanted us to sell them the game and publish it under their name. Naturally, this has always been a dream of mine, was to publish one of my games with a publisher. We negotiated a little bit about what we wanted to deliver and what they wanted from us. Well, the publisher wanted a couple of changes. One was they wanted to change the monetization model. Instead of a 99 cents download, it was free to play. They wanted it to be multi-platform so that it had to run on iOS and Android. So naturally, we said, hey, we can do it. And the very first thing that happened was we talked to ourselves and asked, can we do it? We had a couple of technical hurdles. The first one was that it had to run on Android. What that meant was, number one, we had to ditch all of our existing code because it was written in Objective-C, which was locked down onto the iPhone, the Apple line of products. So we switched language from Objective-C to C++, which supported both Android and Apple. And that took about 1 week of frantic coding to translate everything from one language to the other, and hit compile and hoped it all worked. And yeah, it worked. So we came to an agreement with the game publisher on what the final product would be and set about codifying that in a contract. The contract had all the legal stuff, all the boring legal stuff written into it. But the more interesting stuff was that it had a set of milestones in it. What milestones in this context is a set of deliverables that we had to accomplish in order to receive money from the publisher. There's usually a payout, an agreed price of which the publisher will pay for the final product. So let's say it's $200,000. In that case, you don't, as a developer, get the entire $200,000 sum right off the bat. What you end up doing is you get a portion of it upfront, maybe, but if you had a decent publisher, they would give you X amount of dollars upfront, and then they would set goals along the way called milestones, which they would pay you various sums of money. The milestones were design documents, a pre-alpha stage, an alpha stage, a beta stage, a gold master, and a launch stage. The game design or game document phase was simply going through and outlining all the features that was in the game and everything that it needed to be considered complete. In the alpha state, the game had to be complete, but there was some leeway in that it could run a little slow. There could be some crashes, some performance issues, things of that nature. The beta stage, most of that would have to have been rectified. So all the major crashes, everything had to run fairly smoothly. There couldn't be any outstanding issues of that nature. The Gold Master stage takes it one step further, meaning all that has to be cleaned up and the publisher has to say, yes, we accept this. There's no flaws, no defects in it that would affect the performance of the product, and we're happy with it. And finally, the launch phase is when we deliver the Gold Master to the publisher and they accept it and it goes out to the public. We negotiate with the publisher, they set out the milestones, we agreed to the milestones and began working with, we began working on the game. So that required hiring artists, hiring musicians, level designers, a project manager, a QA team, and all the while we're building our game, sending it out to them, getting feedback from the publisher, and ultimately the game was complete. So the game is in the hands of the publisher at this point as a Gold Master. We were excited. We were ready to launch the game. We went to E3 at that time, E3 in Las Vegas, which is the Electronic Entertainment Expo. And then the game was launched. When we launched the game, we saw it on Apple's featured new games page. So we were featured by Apple. Exciting. When a player goes into the App Store, our icon was right there. Everyone could download it. What we did is we saw all the downloads coming in, and there were like a couple of tens of thousands of downloads a day. Sweet. And then a week later, all gone. No more downloads. Why? Why did that happen? Well, we have to understand the App Store at that time. There was absolutely very little in way of promoting your product without it showing up on Apple's featured page. So if you were not seen on a top 10 list or a featured list, then there was no way you would get visibility apart from buying ads. So what that meant was there had to be marketing dollars spent to acquire users, so user acquisition. What that meant is you had to run Facebook ads or whatever, Twitter ads or Google ads that basically put your game, your icon, your thumbnail up and get people to download it. But it costs something like $2 per user to acquire them. However, I think the forecast was something like a user would make like $1 per person per game. So that's how much a user was worth. They were worth about $1, but it cost about $2 per person to acquire through any ad mechanism. So the publisher looked at that and just thought, we're not going to run any ads. We're not going to compete in the ad space and see if it worked organically. Spoiler alert, it does not work organically. The publisher rightfully looked at the numbers and just thought, yeah, we don't think we can support this anymore. And the game just had organic numbers. So at this point, everything was just trickling from tens of thousands to hundreds to just like one or two per day, to the point where it flatlined. Our issue is user retention. User retention is huge. User retention is your game. So in our case, user retention was not enough to get people to come back to our game. What most games usually have is they have an addictive loop where a player would come in and they would progress, and then something draws them back into the game so that they would open up the app again the next time. People like Candy Crush does that so well, just gets people addicted to it so that they keep coming back. While our game was great, it just didn't have the retention. We did not focus group test our game enough. We did not have it in front of players and refine it to the point where they would just be addicted and keep coming back. We had it to the point where people would play it, they would have fun with it, but it just wasn't a part of their life, which is something that you have to have in this market, because the initial cost to acquire a user is pretty high, but if that user doesn't come back the next day to play it, it's all for nothing. So despite our game being fairly fun for most users who came in, it still needed that little extra something to get people to come back. And to be honest, I don't know what that extra something was, but it might have required another 2 to 3 months of development, which we just didn't have time for. If you made it this far, thanks. It's been quite a journey. It's been quite a learning experience, and it's been something that I'll always look back fondly upon. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, or if you've gone through something similar, feel free to give me a shout, and hope to see you in the next one.
Make sure to subscribe and like.
Okay, I'm just gonna zoom up a bit. So much setup. So we showed our game to a game publisher.
Publisher?
Yes. Publish one of my games with a publisher. Okay, hold on, cut. What?
And my son.
No! I gotta do this all over again. Okay, cut.
What was wrong with that?
I got my details wrong.